Earlier, I spoke with Rana Mitter. He's the director of the China Center at Oxford University. I asked him about the significance of China's upcoming victory parade and the importance of the anniversary.
So I think this is going to be one of the biggest demonstrations of the importance of that set of events more than 70 years ago now, the Second World War in Asia, in which China, of course, lost more than 14 million of its soldiers and civilians, and nearly 100 million Chinese became refugees during those years. So it was a pretty major set of events, and this commemoration really shows how important it is. Now, an interesting question will be who from overseas will actually be coming. There have been quite a few invitations, I understand, to foreign leaders, but the attendance list is not yet clear. It may be that some of the countries which have the closest diplomatic relations with China, North Korea would be an example of that, may well send representatives. But I would be surprised if there was representation, for instance, from Japan, the enemy, the opponent, of course, of China during that war. Still a rather sticky set of relationships between the two countries, and so I would think it's less likely that the Japanese Prime Minister would be there, although I imagine there will perhaps be some Japanese diplomatic representation.
We know that over 50,000 Chinese veterans have now been given reparations ahead of this Victory Day parade. Why now on the 70th anniversary?
I think this 70th anniversary is the first one, really, where the narrative of World War II, you might say China's good war, the war in which it fought with Western allies against international fascism and nationalism, has really been integrated into the national story of China, making today's young Chinese, people who couldn't even possibly have any memories of it themselves, but maybe have heard stories from grandparents, getting them to understand that this is their story too. And as part of that, there's been a huge amount of interest, for instance, in social media in China, in bringing some form of restitution, some form of honor to people who are perhaps war veterans now in their 80s and 90s and never really got those sorts of veteran pensions. Some of them, of course, come from the troops that followed the old nationalist party, the Kuomintang, which for a long time, of course, was in opposition to the Communist Party of China, but of course fought alongside them when opposing the Japanese. So that's one element of why some of these pensions and some of these veterans are being honored now in a way that wasn't the case 10, 20 or 30 years ago.
Let's talk about the pomp and circumstance leading up to this. We know that Russia has marked the anniversary with a military parade, but why China and why now?
Well, I think it's the first time you have a full military parade of this sort, which is attached to the commemoration of the end of World War II. But in fact, military parades of various sorts have been used in the past to commemorate other events. One example of that would be the commemorations around the anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China, which of course tend to come up in years with a 9 at the end of them, because of course that happened in 1949. So what makes this innovative in a sense is that this gesture of the military parade is being used to commemorate this event of the war against Japan, and also, of course, this sense of growing national Chinese identity, which is partly linked to the idea of China becoming a stronger military power in the region.
Rana Mitter, thank you, joining us from Oxford.
Thank you very much, Susan.